And in case you're not sure if you're in the right place, this webinar is Global Mobility, the best practices for a strategic win. And joining us today, we have two wonderful speakers. First, we have Meghan M. Biro. Meghan is a globally recognized HR tech analyst, author, speaker, and brand strategist. She's the founder of Talent Culture, where she hosts Work Trends, a popular weekly Twitter chat and podcast. Her career spans across recruiting, talent management, digital media, and brand strategy for hundreds of companies, from startups to global brands like Microsoft, IBM, and Google. Meghan can be regularly found on Forbes, Sherm, Talent Culture, and a variety of other outlets. And you can find her on Twitter and Instagram at Meghan M. Biro. Also joining us, we have Susanna Warner-Corbacho. Susanna has been working in the global mobility and human resources area for almost 20 years. She currently heads the global mobility function at Schneider Electric, based in the Paris area. She joined Schneider, a leader in energy automation, in 2017 to lead their global mobility transformation journey. Prior to joining Schneider Electric, Susanna was the group head of international mobility in two other Fortune 500 companies. She also had held positions in talent acquisition and talent development. She's a British national and began her career in Paris as a tax consultant. All right. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Meghan, who's going to lead us through this webinar. Meghan, take it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. We're talking about global mobility today with Susanna Warner-Corbacho. She's VP of International Mobility at Schneider Electric. And Schneider is really a compelling example of how an ever-evolving organization can really leverage global mobility management to transform talent development from task-based to strategic. In fact, it's been so successful that it recently was recognized by Brandon Hall, receiving a Bronze Award for innovation. Mobility is entering the main stage as a key differentiator for organizations that want to attract, recruit, develop, and retain great talent. How companies present themselves in terms of mobility is going to be increasingly important as the workplace continues expanding across the globe. But it's also critical to provide a global mobility management program that fits both your needs as an organization and your employees' needs. In this era of employee experience being, and this is so important, as many of you already know, you need to be able to provide opportunities that appeal to employees' personal needs as well as professional objectives, and that can accommodate the needs of their lives and families. So having mobility offerings that don't overburden your bottom line, but conform to the parameters of cost, administration, duration, and other factors, that's going to ensure that you're practicing equity when offering mobile opportunities. And this will then support diversity and inclusion. So long story short, when global mobility is well managed and not siloed away from other functions of operations, it becomes a strategic advantage for both employer and employee. It can provide a high quality employee experience, and that's why it's so exciting, right? You can actually increase levels of engagement and provide invaluable growth opportunities for employees that then align with their career objectives with your business objectives. So a successful mobility program entails making some very specific choices about how you're going to execute and deliver. Not only the opportunities, but we're talking logistics, right? You've got to have a network that enables your employees to thrive and contribute the most value. So making mobility a strategic win may seem far more doable after this webinar. At least that's our hope here today, right? So I'm really looking forward to this fascinating discussion about raising mobility programs from transactional to task-based to a strategic asset to your organization. Susanna has so much experience in this, and the program at Schneider Electric is such an example. I'm thrilled that she's here to share her perspectives as an insider for this very collaborative conversation we're going to have. And then do me a favor, stick around, because we're going to have Q&A at the end. We're going to be taking your questions about global mobility, best practices, and how to leverage it to strategic advance. So there we go. So I want to talk about what we're covering today. I think the evolution of Schneider Electric's mobility program and why it chose to focus on improving global mobility, how to balance selectivity and opportunity. This is an absolutely great topic that Susanna has some key insights on. How to facilitate traditional and non-traditional mobility scenarios that go along with a changing workplace, and how we're working now. Determine those right criteria and durations for any mobility assignment. How to think outside the box to create assignments that actually work. I know a lot of you are struggling with that right now. And why partnering with other branches of HR is critical, particularly in terms of overall strategic alignment. We're going to be unpacking how to improve diversity and inclusion in mobility specifically. I think there's an incredible opportunity in mobility here. Also, how to take your organization's mobility program from transactional to strategic. Last but certainly not least, how to get technology, data, and governance to work together and why they should. So without further ado, Sean, I think we've got some poll questions.
We do have a poll question just to gauge the room here. We're going to launch that for you. So we would like to know, what is the biggest challenge in mobility for your organization? And you should see a quick poll box that has popped up on your screen. If you can go ahead and take a moment to put in your answer, that'll help us guide the conversation today. So Megan, some interesting results that we have. So 28% say it's how to create effective and efficient mobility policies. The other big ones here, 29% tracking the outcome and results of assignments. And then another 21% say how to ensure global compliance and risk. Not too many people are worried about how to choose who is considered for mobility opportunities, only a few percentage points there. And then kind of in the middle is how to manage the administration of our mobility program. So an interesting spread, a number of challenges we're seeing, I guess, across all here.
To me, the range of these answers here shows just how much we're thinking about global mobility management in general, and the need for us to unpack today the kinds of approaches that we can best tackle to tailor towards your culture and your organization. So thanks again for weighing in. We appreciate it. The importance of being strategic, it's something that, I'm talking a lot about right now. And I think the reality is mobility is becoming a key issue for more and more organizations. A recent study by Wakefield Research for Topia, and it was called Mobility in Focus, surveyed 600 full-time professionals and HR executives to find out how our perceptions of and approaches to mobility is changing. I have to say, these were pretty interesting results. 96% of you agree that effective mobility programs increase employee performance and retention. 99% of these respondents agree that it helps businesses grow and become more agile. 94% agreed that it's critical for driving diversity in an organization. So these numbers are nearly unanimous in the belief, in the role that mobility programs can play an important role in the organization in terms of performance, retention, and therefore engagement. And in terms of enabling a business to grow, scale, and be more flexible in its operational capacities. So certainly in terms of improving diversity, right, I'm also going to include inclusion in any organization. So these things really are going hand in hand now. Increasingly, we have a global mindset regarding business, right? Many of us see the opportunity to work in a different country, experience a different culture as part of a career as well as personal growth. And given today's increasingly blurred boundary between work and life, I think it makes a lot of sense. Succeeding on a global scale, however, requires continuous innovation, adaptation, and being able to bring fresh perspectives to the table, right? This is what we call culture, which is why I think providing your talent with global opportunities is so critical. To be a global brand right now, you really need people who are willing to be all over the globe, literally. And you need to support their ambitions to do this, as well as the practical needs. So in a sense, a global mobility opportunity can be unforgettable. It can be life-changing. It's a career change, right? And this all points to employee experience, right? And this also turns good employees into incredible employees. And that's what I find so exciting. On the employer side of things, the better you can manage a global mobility program, the more successful you can be as a global enterprise. So keep that in mind. Okay, so let's talk about the best of the best, okay? What does it take to win an award with your global mobility program, right? On September 19th of this year, Brandon Hall Group announced the winners of its Human Capital Management Awards, and Schneider Electric and Topia received the Bronze Excellence Award for Best Unique or Innovative Workforce Management Program. What I want to point out here is that from the start, this was not just about creating a program in and of itself. It was about aligning on strategy, learning to implement better policy, driving better value, and doing so in a spirit of collaboration and, what's this most important word we're thinking about, innovation. The cloud-based global mobility management solutions supported and also facilitated a shift in both policy and procedure that was meant to not only create more value for the organization, but provide insights that really help Schneider make the mobility program drive even more value, making better decisions about employee relocation, and connecting employee relocation into its overall growth and employee engagement strategy. Topia's technology supported Schneider Electric's implementation of revised policies and automated procedures, giving the company better insight into how its mobility program drives value, right? It also enabled them to more effectively make decisions about employee relocation as part of the company's broader business growth and employee engagement strategy. So as far as the award, the evaluating panel included the followings, right? Veterans, independent senior industry experts, Brandon Hall Group analysts and executives. They all looked at each and every entry based on the program, how well it fit the need, the program design, functionality, innovation, and overall measurable benefits. This award has been going on for more than 20 years, and I think it's really worth mentioning today. These are all about HR success stories, right? So it's really fun to be able to talk about this one. Okay, so speaking of fun, let's talk about mobility as a talent strategy, right? The Wakefield research for Topia shows that not only are leaders and HR professionals thinking about mobility, employees are too. 70% agree that transferring to another branch or location within their company would advance their career. And 22% of employees have left a company specifically because they wanted to transfer locations but were not permitted to do so by their organization. Let's let this sink in for a minute. Offering employees a mobile opportunity is about tapping into this employee growth mindset for 70% of employees. And not offering a mobility opportunity may mean you need to say goodbye to at least 22% of your workforce. So consider this from a talent perspective. Moves can be life-changing. They can be complicated and stressful. And employees, while they also want to move safely, they want to move in a way that would not disrupt their work relationships. 80% have career-related hesitations, mainly around current and new work relationships, right? They want support, which is absolutely understandable if you think about it, right? Actually, to be honest with you, I'm a bit surprised the statistics aren't even higher. But it could also be the nature of the respondents themselves, as we know, okay? So I'm going to break this down for you. 57% want support in terms of relocation and cash allowances. 53% want housing assistance. 44% want health care and insurance coordination. 33% want spouse or family support. So mobility has to cover a lot of practical territory in order to meet the needs of your employees, but it can, right? We can do this in a strategic way. I think it has the opportunity to improve retention, which I know is so top of mind when we talk about talent strategy right now. Okay, so let's dive in and talk more specifically about Schneider Electric. What this company has done is really going to be a great model for companies of any size or industry looking for ways to best tackle their own mobility challenges. But what it took is committing to improving the mobility program and everything about it, which is really a vital component of Schneider's business. So let me break it down for you. Schneider is a global Fortune 500 French multinational energy and automation corporation. They're based in France. They have more than 137,000 employees worldwide in more than 100 locations. In 2018, it earned 26 billion euros in revenue, to give you an idea, okay? So one thing that's very clear about this organization It's a mission dedicated to innovation, and it's committed to inclusivity and empowerment. And this is a truly innovative company in how it provides energy management and automation to its customers, right? Buildings, industries, infrastructure, and data centers. As CNBC noted, it's helping, right, its customers leverage the Internet of Things to make their businesses more connected, more efficient, more sustainable. And they are committed to green manufacturing and a low carbon future. It's created a exostructure, which I think is such an interesting word, and it's a really fascinating enabled platform by the Internet of Things. So digital transformation is absolutely part of this company. In keeping with its mission and objectives, it makes sense to really look at its own global mobility offerings and bringing this digital transformation to those as well. So mobility and opportunity aren't just an aspiration at Schneider, they're actually part of the way the organization operates its culture, again, right? This is how Schneider director Casey Crossley describes Schneider's mindset regarding mobility and her role as a leader to support and follow through with this mindset. Get this. The mindset my leaders and I for our teams have continues to be one of mobility and opportunity. The future achievements of my team start with these actions I take every day by giving them opportunities, encouraging them to expand their knowledge, and connecting them with others is really why this company has engaged employees. And again, let's keep this number in mind, around 180,000 of them. So let that sink in for a minute when we start thinking about the macro level that we're talking about here. And this is what Susanna Warner-Corbacho, and the VP of International Mobility at Schneider Electric, says about the award-winning mobility program. We're better able to match candidates with opportunities, have greater visibility into performance, and are able to offer more flexible move packages and get a clearer picture of projected costs. So perhaps most importantly, we can analyze their strategic purpose for moves more effectively and determine whether the company is achieving our objectives. So inventory this for a minute, and you're going to get a clear set of best practices that you can follow at your own organization, right? Greater visibility into performance, offering more flexible move packages, greater clarity in terms of projected costs, the ability to analyze their strategic purposes of moves, and assess if the company is meeting its own goals, which means they're leveraging digital tools like this from the management side, dimensional and flexible reporting, continuous data gathering on performance as well as cost, automated workflows for ease of management, more precise management of cost and budgets, the means to analyze, forecast, and predict, administrative, regulatory, and compliance components, and flexible and accurate management each and every assignment. So offering features like this for employees that support those management tasks with data and reporting are as follows. On demand, right? They're always on self-service. 24/7 support, including automated chatbot, access to human answers, and access to a global catalog of resources. This means they're creating an interactive, savable, keyword, flexible task list, right? You also want to have access to layers and layers of guidance and expertise on every facet of relocation that continues throughout the life and aftermath of that global assignment. So we have an absolute array of workable, effective, and proven solutions for employees that covers everything from logistics, culture, customs, legal, family, school, home repairs, language, and transportation, okay? A lot here, as you can imagine. An inclusive approach that allows for different stages of life, generations, cultures, genders, family needs, and otherwise. So I think a commitment to provide this across the board, not only as a perk for some elite group or your upper level talent, but to all. Okay, so now that I've quoted Susanna, it's time to actually bring her in. So we are so excited you're here. I want to point something out before we dive in. Schneider sees innovation as one of its core values. But when we were discussing this webinar, I know you touched on Schneider's needing to be more innovative about its own mobility program to match the needs of the organization. Susanna, welcome.
Thank you, Megan. It's great to be with you.
Talk to us about your role in Schneider Electric's mobility transformation.
So, thanks. Yes, I joined the company in January 2017. And that was a really exciting time for Schneider because they had just kicked off on a project which was steered by our global HR committee about global mobility and really transforming our approach. There was a kind of transversal working group, and that involved people from talent, diversity and inclusion, rewards, as well as HR business partners. And we worked with them really collaboratively on that project. And really the objective there was to redefine our approach. And in particular, we wanted to ensure that we, define the purpose of mobility in our organization, and we aligned that with our own unique talent and diversity strategy. So now my let's say my contribution was that I could bring a kind of external perspective because I was new to the company, but had a strong experience in the mobility field, whilst obviously working with the project team who understood the culture, the values, and the business expectations there. And obviously we worked under the guidance of the leadership team who gave us the overall direction and vision.
So, Susanna, how did Schneider Electric approach global mobility in the past?
Well, they had a pretty robust approach in terms of the process with communicated and documented policies. What potentially lacked was how to connect that with the individual mobility with the bigger mobility picture. So how to track all types of mobility, including local contracts, because some of our employees transfer under local contracts, and also how to ensure that we get a return on investment for the company and that alignment with our overall talent and diversity approach.
What were your goals in terms of evolving global mobility at Schneider?
Well, first of all, as I mentioned, to align those policies with our talent and diversity strategy. Our top management had a really strong people vision for the company, which is about both global and local. So we wanted to kind of reconcile the fact that whilst we wanted to enable global mobility and we want to offer opportunities to our employees, because as a global company, it's key factor for attraction. We also wanted to make sure that we leverage our distributed multi-hub organization so that we can attract and grow sustainable talent at a local level as well. So those were two things that we had to really balance. Now, this multi-hub organization is really about being close to and understanding our markets and customers. That's essential for us. We really want to be very close to those markets so that we ensure that we get that alignment, that local alignment. We need our leaders and our future leaders to really know those markets. So global leaders are generally based in 3 key hubs, which are in the US, in Hong Kong, and in France. And we gravitate and attract talent around those key hubs. Now, another goal in terms of our objective of evolving global mobility was obviously to introduce some digital transformation to the assignment management process. And that was a journey that we obviously embarked upon with our partner Topia.
Let's talk about one of the challenges for Schneider, right? Nothing's perfect, as we know, and this is always very challenging for organizations, depending on your size, of course, but a number of other factors. Offering global mobility opportunities to more in the workforce, but also making sure it's a strategic opportunity to recognize high performance and leverage their talent, skill, and really value in a new role, right? So my question for you, Susanna, is, how do you balance selectivity and opportunity?
Yeah, that's obviously a tricky thing there, because we want to be able to offer those attractive opportunities, but global mobility is also an investment for the company. So we have to manage that investment really with a talent business case for each mobility. And put into perspective moving people around globally with also our need to develop local talent. So to do that, we put in place a governance process. And you can see on this slide a kind of extract from that governance questionnaire process. And this drives the HR business partners to really define what is the purpose of the mobility, and to, in defining that purpose, also look at that in the perspective of what is the potential and performance of the candidate. For example, if the mobility is really for development, the individual should have a high potential profile. If they're expected to transfer skills, they need to have the right capabilities to train or develop others, and also have a high level of expertise and performance in their field. So it's really making sure that we're taking a talent view of individuals who are proposed on mobility, and ensuring that we're making the right strategic choices there. But on the other side, we also want to have a very open talent market, and we want to give our employees visibility on opportunities throughout Schneider worldwide, and the opportunity to apply for those. And irrespective of whether the assignment is really more a company or initiated or an employee initiated one, and whether they relocate on a kind of expat contract or they're transferred onto a local contract, we still apply the same governance process, because we're convinced that we need to look at how we move people around globally versus how we build and strengthen and develop the local pipeline. So we still look at that performance and potential of the candidates, and we look at the local talent pipeline in comparison and perspective with that.
Well, I tell you, there are so many disruptive shifts in how we're working now. As you know, we've got 5 generations in the workforce, which means that employee engagement is really a condition, right, based on an individual's needs and preferences, which in many ways is going to reflect their generation. And the influx of Millennial and Generation Z, who have had specific expectations about the way they work and the growth opportunities they encounter or not. So add to that what I'm viewing as a decentralization of the physical workforce, right, in which we're seeing an increase in reliance on gig workers, consultants, freelancers, remote workers, right? And then we've got results-based workplaces, right, that are prioritizing results and completion over a uniform schedule and day-to-day tasks. So clearly a lot is going on here, right? So how do you, Susanna, include all of these changes in mobility? How do you facilitate traditional and non-traditional mobility scenarios?
Sure. Well, definitely that was a goal for us, to make sure that we were enlarging and building the mobility scope. We started off with a scope that was more the traditional expat assignment base, and by that I mean the typical 3 to 5 year expat assignment, and people who will then return to their home country. And we wanted to extend that to employees who were permanently relocating to other countries on local contracts. We also wanted to include and support new hires, new international hires, who often need relocation support. And why did we want to do that? We wanted to make sure that we were getting a really holistic view on the talent that moves within the company. For one reason was to build some tailored support for those populations, which hadn't necessarily been consistently managed under the same policies in the past. But we also wanted to get a really global view of talent moving so that we could get insights into where there were potential gaps in local talent pipelines and where countries were working more self-sufficiently or whether they were more dependent on importing or exporting talent. So it really gives us a great visibility on all of those patterns of movements within the company. Now, beyond that, we're also working on a pilot in Schneider to introduce some very innovative technology to facilitate an open talent market which uses artificial intelligence. And the aim of this is really to be able to connect employees with opportunities to work on projects whilst they also continue in their main role, and as well as also look at other roles and opportunities that are opening internally. So this is really a project that projects that don't involve necessarily physical mobility. So people can, develop new skills and transfer their existing ones and experiment working with other locations and countries and teams. And it's really aligned with our aim to enable employees to learn every day and to continue to develop their competencies. It's really effective to leverage and engage and harness our own people rather than looking for additional external temporary capacity on projects. So it's a way for us to really engage with people, give them opportunities to work very globally, but without necessarily entailing actual mobility.
All right. Well, thank you. This has been a fascinating discussion. And I think, Sean, it's about that time, right?
Yep,
We've got a poll question.
Yes, we do. So we're looking for who is eligible for global mobility assignments in your company. This is a short one, so we'll just leave this up for a little bit. Do you offer mobility opportunities to everyone? Do you only offer opportunities to the best employees? Or you don't currently offer opportunities to present employees? So maybe you only move people when you're hiring. Some interesting results. Around 48% offer mobility opportunities to everyone in their company, which is great to hear. 38 only offer mobility opportunities to the best employees, and the remainder don't offer global mobility opportunities to present employees.
Interesting. I mean, I think we've got a lot of great answers coming in. I think, this question is really a reminder that global mobility is treated in so many different ways depending on the organization. So not everyone is leveraging it as a mutual growth opportunity. Some of you are reserving it only for certain employees or new hires. So really interesting stuff. Thanks again, audience, for weighing in. We appreciate it. Okay, so let's get back to our conversation. Susanna, really what resonates for me is that Schneider's mobility team took a very careful look at mobility. You anticipated each assignment, what it entailed, right? Skills, practicalities, duration, teamwork, and then revamped the mobility program to best frame each assignment. In essence, you turned away from this whole cookie cutter approach to a very flexible one, which I find interesting, right? You were customizing mobility based on the requirements, objectives, parameters of the role. So it's really anything but a one-size-fits-all. Really, it's another instance where being able to manage this digitally enables a lot more leeway. And of course, this plays into management best practices, right, of all these facets of global assignments, such as cost and benefit, right, ROI, predicting how long something should take. I think it's a really forward-thinking strategy. But some organizations trying to manage their global presence may be a little bit concerned with having maybe too many great employees scattered all over the globe for too long, right? In other words, You've got top managers still in Hong Kong, right? Even though the project is over, because the terms of the assignment called for more time than it took, but you really need them back in Boston. So, it seems like it's increasingly important for a company to have a capability to determine how long each assignment really needs to be. So having said all this, how do you determine the right criteria and duration for each mobility assignment? And then could you give us some pointers around this?
Sure. Well, obviously, it's really dependent on your business. But when we in Schneider looked at it and segmented our approach, and redefined the different purposes of mobility, we obviously had to look at what was the reasonable duration for each type of mobility. Now, for example, if you're looking at developmental assignments for people to develop people with potential, the duration should be relatively short, because you really want those high potential employees to get access to accelerated development opportunities, and you should be moving them quite quickly through your organization. And then if you compare that with transferring expertise or acquiring expertise, you might need a little bit longer to train and to get those employees up to speed, and to ensure that you have, really transferred those skills locally, and have a kind of, let's say, local successor who knows exactly how to deploy those skills once that person's gone back. Now, then if you take a look at leadership roles, in general, you'd need a longer tenure for those, because you need to make sure that you build those sustainable relationships locally. You have that sustainable stakeholder management, and you need to make sure that you have that really seamless business continuity. So we've defined a maximum duration for each of these types of mobilities, so that we really challenge, and we ensure that we are, focusing on managing our investment proactively, so that we don't block local candidates, because ultimately we don't want to replace an international assignee or an expatriate by another international assignee and expatriate, right? You want to grow those successes locally, and we don't want to block that local succession, and to have a kind of situation where local talents don't see the opportunities coming. So now it's good to remember that exact tenure is not formulaic, and there are always company situation, individual and family circumstances, or even compliance considerations, as well as the overall cost and investment. So durations, we define the kind of ideal one, but obviously we look at the circumstances as well.
I'm going to ask you this. Why is working with other branches of HR on global mobility so critical, and how are you doing it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Now, when I when I actually joined Schneider, my boss said that one of the reasons for hiring me was that although I was an expert in global mobility, I'd also held roles in talent management and in talent acquisition, as well as reward. And I think that getting experience in other areas of HR can make you a better partner. And it's really a little bit like speaking different languages. And you can, relate to your colleagues in other areas and empathize with their challenges a lot more. Now, I'm really fortunate that I work in an HR function where collaboration is really the norm, and we don't work in silos. People really used to working transversely, and we're encouraged also to challenge each other and learn every day. And that's really driven from the top of our organization by our CHRO, who's Olivier Blum. And in the scope of this global mobility transformation in particular, I was really fortunate to work with 3 really inspiring leaders. So the head of talent management and diversity, the head of reward, and my direct boss, who leads HR operations, strategy, and technology worldwide. And those 3 inspiring leaders actually really helped, because they really aligned the vision and the policy direction. And that's quite critical to the success of the project. because really global mobility is so transversal. So it touches so many different areas, and having those people fully aligned and collaborating was really important. Now, we also worked in implementing this transformation. We had to work with really all areas of HR, so operations, HR business partners, talent, diversity, rewards, and benefits. And we also had to work with our communications area on how to produce all the assets to communicate on this campaign to managers, to HR, and the business on the changes that we were implementing. We also designed an HR awareness module with our learning partners, which we called Mobility with Purpose. And it really helped to strategically position the program and explain, what we were trying to achieve, why we wanted to implement this strategy. Now, looking at the technology part, obviously our internal technology area was really a key partner for us, and also with Topia. After we had implemented the new policies and we'd operated them for several months, we were then able to put this technology into place to really support the new processes and approach. And it created the links between mobility and talent, because we could bring in this talent data into our selection and governance process. And that gave us the ability to really support the talent and diversity agenda more. And we've got much broader visibility and insights now into our mobile population. And we can really hold up the mirror to the business and alert if we really see patterns in the business that don't match the strategy. So overall, we've been able to achieve this transformation in a relatively short period, because we had this very clear vision of what we wanted to do. We were empowered to do it, and we had this great collaboration between, both internal teams in Schneider and obviously our external partners to make it happen.
Excellent. Well, thank you for all this wisdom. We're really learning a lot from you, Susanna. And, seeing a case study in action, there's nothing better. So let's get over to a very important topic right now. How are we using mobility to improve diversity and inclusion?
Right. Well, firstly, Schneider Electric is really committed to diversity and inclusion and taking concrete action. And some examples of this is that we've been really involved in the He for She movement. We've been globally externally recognized by Equileap and Bloomberg in 2018 and 2019. And Schneider Electric's been really innovative in deploying a global policy for family leave to support our employees, as well as deploying bias awareness training globally as well. Now, global mobility in itself is a great way of bringing diverse people together. But we really decided to focus on ensuring that we were being inclusive enough in our policies, in our communication, and in the support that we were providing. For example, we reviewed our definition of the family to include non-traditional families and same-sex couples, and we also improved support for single parents who relocate. Now, regarding gender diversity in particular, looking at research on this topic, we noted there could be a higher perception that women may not be mobile versus their male colleagues, and also that there could be greater barriers regarding dual career and family topics. So we decided to both enhance our support for dual career and communicate more extensively on the support for dual career couples. And we put in place testimonials of some key women international assignees to encourage other people and to serve as role models and advocates of mobility. And overall, I'm very happy to share that we did improve our gender diversity, which has moved from 16 to 23% in the last 4 years. Now, that might still seem too low, but it is actually far above our industry average, which is around 12%. Now,
Excellent.
we're also, of course,
well, this is, sorry to interrupt you. I just want to let everybody know we have so much to cover today. We're down to about 10 minutes left. So if you can briefly touch upon how you've taken Schneider's mobility program from transactional to strategic, and then I've got a couple more questions for you after that. Thank you.
Sure. So obviously this we couldn't have achieved it without a really clear mandate, and the willingness for HR to work together, to define how we were going to manage mobility going forward. Now, of course, global mobility is a kind of service provider, and we have to make things happen and support employees moving, and do that in a seamless and compliant way. But what was great in Schneider is that we were allowed, let's say, to take more space on the why, not just the what, but the why, and to keep doing that, to keep taking that space. So, for example, when somebody needs to be extended in an assignment, we'll ask why, and does it match our strategy? So we'll challenge the need, and we'll ask about succession planning and whether a successor has been identified yet, what's the local talent situation, and being part of this why is really key to enabling the strategy. So not just saying, okay, let's extend, but really asking why. And it is a challenge because sometimes people and the business just want to get on with things and not ask themselves why. But we're really
Right.
lucky that, from the top of our organization, this topic is really viewed as integral to our strategy. And, we're really enabled and empowered to ask those questions about why.
So let me ask you this. How do you get tech, data, and governance to all work together? Because that's tricky.
It definitely is, and we have come a very long way. We came from a long way, and we started with a situation where global mobility was actually being managed in 9 different countries from 52 different databases, and they were mainly Excel. So you can imagine that it was a real revolution to go onto one global platform with Topia's solution. And that enabled us to just make the link between our policies, automate this new governance process, and track our overall delivery of the program between the various HR stakeholders, as well as better anticipate things like returns and to track exceptions. So we're really able to provide also better year-by-year cost estimates to the business. It's interfaced with our master HR system, and that gets us into a much more effective and efficient way of managing the data in a secure way and being able to just provide more insights. So we can now look at, for example, whether international assignees are higher performers than the rest of our employee population, to be sure that we're really investing in the right people and we're getting that return on investment. Now, as our next steps, we're really looking to continue to improve user experience and also to simplify some of the processes further. So we're still on a continuous improvement drive.
Sure. Well, listen, we're down to my last question today, and that's what lessons can you give the leaders and decision makers out there who want to optimize their global mobility program?
Sure. Now, I'm not sure if I can give any lessons, but I can at least share what I've observed as important. So I think
Perfect.
you have to be very clear about what is the most important outcome you expect of the program. Ensure that mobility is really connected to all other parts of HR, and that they work together to achieve that outcome. Get inspiration from others. When we were looking at our policies and approach, we were benchmarking, we were looking at the different technology solutions that were out there to support the change. And then you want to ensure that you have the right people in your mobility team who can make it happen, and that you really empower them as well. That requires a diverse team with expertise, but also ideally other profiles from other areas of HR as well, that can make the link with the rest of the organization.
Well, listen, let's recap, everybody. This has been such a great discussion. And Susanna, thank you. You've given us so much food for thought. I'm going to go over right now a recap. Here are 6 critical strategies that are going to help you in evolving your global mobility program, making it more strategic, competitive, making it part of your culture. Here's the recap. You want to make sure you're balancing selectivity and opportunity to support the ambitions and growth of your workforce. Global mobility, I should say, isn't a one-size-fits-all proposition. I think there's many kinds of opportunities. We've got varying durations, and your workforce will also have a whole range of needs in terms of an assignment. You want to make sure you involve other departments in HR and that everybody is linked and working together. And when you think about taking global mobility to the next level, right, I think it's an incredible strategy in terms of increasing diversity and inclusion in your workforce, like Susanna touched upon, eliminating any bias in promotions and assignments. You want this interconnected tech governance and data, so everything is supporting your program simultaneously and reciprocally, right? So when you take global mobility from a series of tasks to a strategic program, it really becomes a key differentiator for your company culture. So I want to thank each and every one of you today for attending this, and especially to our special guest, Susanna Warner-Corbacho, VP of International Mobility at Schneider Electric, and congratulate you on your Brandon Hall win. It's been an absolute honor to chat with you, and we still have a couple minutes for your questions. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Megan. It's been great to be here.
Great, and it looks like we have had a couple of questions that have come in, and if you do have your questions, you can go ahead and submit them now, and if we can't get to all of them, that's okay. We'll try to follow up with you individually. So, Megan, how do you think we can leverage global mobility to improve our recruiting success as well as our talent management?
Well, that's a really interesting question. So I would first examine the role that mobility plays in your talent strategy in different ways, and then assess strengths and weaknesses. For instance, from a recruiting standpoint, are your global mobility opportunities part of your presentation, right? Are you touting great overseas assignments, but then not really offering them to new hires? So from an HR and talent standpoint, there are these key criteria that you really want to set forth, right? You want to be able to survey your managers on pain points and the good points, right? If they are in charge of teams in, say, multiple locations, right? How's it working? Are your teams able to collaborate successfully, right? So I think you need to be asking questions, and that relates to the why of what Susanna was talking about. I think this all plays into how competitive you can be from this standpoint. So I really think it's a matter of improving global mobility in and of itself, and then that is then going to benefit your recruiting and talent management because it's just a great program that you can talk about.
Great, thanks for that insight. We have one here for Susanna. So what are some of the course corrections you had to do as you evolved your global mobility program over these past few years?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. So one of the things we had to do was to just make adjustments to our governance process because it was a new process, and initially we had validations at our HR committee level, so HR SVP level for each mobility candidate, and it was actually slowing down the process. There was just too many validations, so we had to reduce that to just one. And then we had some challenges around the implementation of the system part, just because it was there was an overlap with how we timed the actual overall policy review. So we had to review the technology project timeline because we basically needed more time to implement and operate the policies before we did the technology implementation. So we needed to mature a little bit and operate those policies first. And that was quite critical to just rework the timeline.
Great, thanks for that insight. Megan, another one here that I think would be great for you is, what do you think are some musts for modern global mobility today?
Well, I think you want to use the technology. You really want to use it to provide your employees with the best digital platform, the best solutions. I think it's really about technology, right? You need to be able to make sure you can get continuous and accurate data. Absolutely make sure your platform is mobile and can be translated into whatever language it needs to be, and make it consistent across the board, right? So I think just enabling employees to choose services they need, right? To choose the way they want to use these services is key, right? So whether it's, taxes, payroll, immigration, legal, accounting, budgeting, funding, like making it easy for people to actually collaborate, and I know that sounds funny, but collaborate with the technology, making that like part of your culture is going to be really, really powerful. So, you can't be doing mobility 2.0 when you don't have 1.0 worked on already. So really, to me, it comes down to having the best technology and then baking that into your culture.
Great, thanks, Meghan. And since we're kind of right at the end of our time here, we're going to do one final question for Susanna. And then just as a reminder, if we weren't able to get to your questions today, we'll be sure to follow up with you individually. So Susanna, final question for you is, our company is merging with another organization, and we both have global mobility programs today, and we need to combine those. Do you have any recommendations to go through that process?
Right, yeah, I can relate to that from previous experience. So, first of all, I want to understand obviously about the new organization's current assignee population and policies. But I'd want to understand where that population was. Was there any kind of risk for those employees, either in terms of HR risk like retention, but also in terms of compliance and immigration? And then in a more general sense, most mergers or acquisitions that I've been involved in, this population is often grandfathered, the existing assignees, I mean, on their current terms and conditions where that's feasible, because you want to ensure the least disturbance and ensure retention of those key people. And then looking forward to define the approach for the future assignees in the new organization, I'd want to understand, what are the reasons that both those merging companies have mobility, and are they aligned in that purpose? Because if the purpose isn't the same, what's it going to be after the merger? What are they going to be sending people on assignments for after that merger has happened? And that'll help you define if you need to just redefine the overall policy and approach, or whether the existing approaches are going to need to kind of coexist. So I'd also ensure I'm looking at industry benchmark for the new organization, if that's from a different business area. And then culture of those companies and their broader HR approach is going to have a big influence as well. And if those cultures are very different, for example, in a previous company, there was a merger between a French and an Egyptian multinational, and culture was obviously very, very different. Those other HR policies of the two companies can be very interlinked with their mobility approach, and also their talent and their reward approach. So if those areas are really differently positioned, or they're linked to a very specific market or geography, that's also going to need to be addressed before the mobility approach can really be defined.
Great. Thanks, Susanna, for sharing some of your experience going through that. At this point, we're going to go ahead and wrap the webinar. I want to thank Meghan and Susanna for being with us today, and of course, those who joined us around the world. I know it's either late or middle of the morning or middle of the afternoon, depending on where you are today. Thank you so much for being with us, and thanks again to our presenters. We hope to see you again at our next webinar, and you can learn more at topia.com/events. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks very much.